I'm joined by two people. The usual person who is digitally next to me is
Jacob, welcome everybody.
yeah. And our first time guest here, we are very honored to be able to have joining us today. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm John Longacre. Yeah.
Right. Welcome to the show. In our last episode, we talked a little bit about Worcester Mennonite Church and some of the people that we've known, myself growing up, and maybe a little bit of how the membership and the people attending church has changed throughout. I have not had the chance to meet John very much at all, to be honest. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation that we get to have together. And hopefully we can all get a lot out of it. I know that I'm going to get maybe the most out of it. So welcome. And why don't, I guess if I can just start off, I'm curious, when did you start coming to Worcester Mennonite and how did you find out about Worcester Mennonite?
I think my wife Julie and I started coming to Worcester Mennonite in the fall of 2007, if memory serves. I grew up in the Mennonite church up in Fairview, Michigan, and went to Heston College, and then went sort of more mainstream evangelical for a lot of years. But then when I got married to Julie in 2006, we were attending another church here in town. Didn't quite seem to be the right fit. And I was starting to kind of want to get back to more of an Anabaptist value structure in my faith experience, really finding that I resonated more and more with those values as life, unfolded. And Julie actually had a relationship with Worcester Mennonite through the organization that she worked with at the College of Worcester. Worcester Mennonite, on a number of occasions, had opened up their building for the student group she was a part of to meet, and a number of students were coming. A number of members of the Worcester Mennonite Church had her over for dinner, or had just fostered a relationship. And so it was really ironic. We didn't start attending Worcester Mennonite till probably a year and a half after we got married. But I think there were more people from Worcester Mennonite at our wedding than there even were from church that we were attending at that time. So it felt like almost like a no-brainer. Like, I wanted to get back into the Mennonite sphere, and Julie already had like this red carpet laid out for her. So it was a very natural transition.
That's fantastic. That kind of brings up the reoccurring theme that we have of hospitality that we've been able to experience.
Yes.
And yeah, wow, what a fantastic thing to hear. And it just, I wouldn't imagine, but that's just great. Yeah. And
maybe I could chime in,
yeah, sure.
if that's okay. Sure. One of the things I really appreciate about John is his openness to experience new things and to travel and to learn about new cultures and groups. John, when we first got to know each other, was always willing to travel with me. If we went to several conferences together, and we would share stories as we would drive and talk about our families and our experiences. And I just think it's really interesting how John has not only traveled in the US, but has also been able to start to reach out and grow and learn more about China, having some experience traveling there, learning the language. And one of the big things that we like to explore are how those intercultural experiences change us and maybe even connect with our faith or give us a deeper insight about living out our faith. And so we wanted to have you on as a guest to talk a little bit about that. But then there's also yet another layer that we want to get to later of how these two wonderful boys came into your life from
Mm.
China. And so how even within your own family, you have this intercultural richness and how that connects with your faith and where you are in life now. So those are some of the pieces that we really would like to hear from you about today. So maybe if you're willing just to share a little bit about maybe your heart in general for travel, learning about other cultures, and maybe also to start with some of your experiences with China and Chinese culture.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, travel is definitely a love of mine. I tell people I don't have like an expensive hobby like fishing or golfing or whatever. So my thing is to plan trips. There's nothing I love better than going to like Barnes and Noble, getting a cup of coffee, and then going to the travel section and just sort of like reading up and dreaming and researching like the next trip I'm gonna take, whether that's somewhere here in the U.S. or less to a lesser degree internationally. Those trips are far further off someday. In fact, I would say my interest in China probably was like in the bucket list category prior to meeting Julie. Like, sounds like a fun place to go see the Great Wall, the Forbidden City someday, Shanghai, maybe when I'm in my 50s and have more discretionary income. But I didn't really think much more about it than that. And then Julie and I met on eHarmony in 2005, and I quickly learned that if this was to be the woman that I would spend the rest of my life with, that China was going to play a pretty big role because it was very important to her. So, I was like, okay, well, we can talk about that. And she was actually asked to, as we were kind of thinking about a timeline for getting married in spring of 06, she had been invited to come to Beijing to help with orientation for this language culture program that our organization does most summers when there's not a pandemic going on. And we were trying to decide, well, do we get married before and I would go along, or would we let her go to China and come back and have like a late summer wedding? And the more we talked about it, I was like, I think it sounds kind of fun to go along. She told me some volunteer tasks and roles I could have if I did. And so we got married in June, and then later that month, I think after what we called our domestic honeymoon, we jokingly called our international honeymoon, which was largely work related, but also afforded us the chance to do some traveling on the side. And because we had, hadn't really gotten settled yet as a couple into life in America, that was a hard trip for me. We were there in probably about 3 weeks, 1 week doing helping with the orientation stuff, and then 2 weeks of traveling to Chengdu, where she had taught in the 90s, taught English in the 90s, and visited a friend down in Shenzhen near Hong Kong. And I remember having like this countdown in my head of like the number of hours left that we'd have to be there until we could get back on the plane and fly home and start doing real life together in Ohio. So I'm not sure what that revealed about my heart at time or my openness to cultural stressors and differences. But there's the story turns out for the better. We went again the next summer for the whole 6-week program with a group of students and some other staff from our organization. And it wasn't until about halfway through the trip that I started the countdown. So like the first weeks, no countdown, was kind of enjoying things. And then 3 weeks in was like, okay, ready to go home again. We did the trip again in 2012, 2014, 2017. And I'm happy to say that there was no countdown going on in my head any of those years. I found myself enjoying being there more and more. The things that were hard for me were just like not knowing the language. And once you get out of Beijing, it's a lot harder to navigate things without knowing Mandarin. In Beijing, a lot of people speak it, and signs are in English, so you can kind of fake your way through pretty easily. But we were going out into Western China, and it was just a whole different kind of scene there. But like the squatty potties were tough. just, you don't have privacy very often. There's crowds everywhere. And as an introvert, that's like, yikes, but then the beautiful things of the culture really started to rise to the top. Like, I love that people just make time for each other in China. Meals are long, especially dinner time. But even lunch, if someone meets you for lunch, they just take their time. It's not like a rushed quick 30-minute thing at Subway like we do here. It's dishes are brought out and put on a lazy Susan, and everyone takes from them, and there's laughter, and there's like a sense of lingering, and hospitality is huge. Like, we've been so blown away and humbled so many times by just the way people will treat us to things as their honored guests. It's like, what did we do to deserve this? And it's really hard to like have a sense that you're paying it back. You know what I mean? Like, trying to be mutual, because they just bend over backward to make you feel like the honored guest. We had an experience in 2012 where a student that our group was teamed up with, arranged for our entire group to go up into the mountains, maybe 3 hours bus ride on switchbacks. I mean, that was a harrowing ride. When we got there, his home looked to me like what I picture homes in Israel in Bible times looking like a, mud brick with a courtyard. All the food is prepared over a fire, and then you come inside and like the whole extended family is living under one roof. They had this huge cushioned area that also had these tables you could like, so they slept on this, the whole family, grandmas, aunts and uncles, whatever, would sleep, and I'm assuming would sleep on this big cushioned area at night. But then during the day, they had these removable tables that they could like plug down into these holes that were there. And like our whole group of, 20 American students, they treated us to this meal of mutton and bread and sheep's milk and butter and stuff. And we are guessing that they probably spent a couple months worth of income on us, and they wouldn't take any money. So we ended up sort of like leaving money, like sneaking, leaving money for them, because, we just wanted to not cause undue financial stress on them. But it was just an experience that I don't think any of the students who went on that trip will ever forget. And I will never forget it. It just felt surreal. Yeah. So all that to say, my love for the culture and the people, and my ability to just kind of like let my hair down, so to speak, and just kind of be like, I'm here in China, has just increased every time we've gone, to the point where like the last time we went in 2017, I didn't want to leave. Like, I was like, part of me is meant to be here. And our family is hopefully going to spend a season living abroad in China. And one of the hopes and goals for that time is that our sons, who are adopted, and I can say more about that too, that they'll have a chance to reconnect with the culture that they originated from, and, get to learn the ins and outs and what makes it beautiful and special. So.
That's wonderful. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. I love hearing that story of how you went from a posture of counting down days till you came back to your home culture, to a point of feeling that part of you belongs there. That's a huge change, to find a sense of home and belonging in the other culture. And then hearing about how now you want your sons to have a deep connection with their culture of origin it's interesting. I remember hearing when you first adopted them that was a thought you had even from the beginning, because wasn't there some amount of original Chinese language speaking that you did in the home at first, when they came, and then did they have maybe some connection, or was there another Chinese speaking person in their lives at that point? I'm trying to remember. Could you speak a little bit about that when they first came in the home and the transition of getting them acclimated and what that was like, trying to introduce them to, things that aren't, I mean, they came as little boys. And so it's partly just raising children, but
Mm.
the
Yep. Yeah. Just to give a little context, we adopted the boys in the winter of 2015. So like November into December was our trip over there. We knew that we wanted to adopt from China. It just seemed like a natural option for our family because there's needs. And just the history of Julie and me both traveling there and falling in love with the culture. It just felt like our family would have some natural skill, I guess, at given our experiences at helping, allow for our sons, once we had them, to be in touch still with their motherland.
Mm.
And so they were 3, almost 4 at the time. They're twins. We had gone in thinking we wanted to adopt 2. But because of the one-child policy, it's rare that you find sibling sets when you're adopting from China. But lo and behold, on the list of available kids, one day we came across these little twins, and we just fell in love at first sight. And they have, of course, spoke Mandarin when we got them. And my wife, speaks a lot more than I do. I'm learning, but she knows a fair amount, enough to get it to make her way around. And when we were over there, so the plan was that we would try to become be a bilingual family, and that we would teach the boys English and help them maintain and expand their Chinese as well. Well, it wasn't due to lack of efforts on my wife's part, but they had two big sisters that they looked up to that were only speaking English, and started going to preschool that fall, and it was no time. I mean, it's just amazing to me how fast kids, without even consciously trying, just pick up language. It doesn't seem fair. It really. I think about how hard I worked to learn it, and then they just, in a matter of months, we're speaking it. And as their English proficiency went up, their Chinese went down. We do have them in tutoring at the moment, so we're hoping that they'll regain, and I think they already are starting to reclaim some of that language. And I always wonder if it's tucked away somewhere in part of their brain, and it's going to come out almost on its own again. But especially when they're over there hearing it and totally immersed. But yeah, I think in 2017 was when we decided as a family that we wanted to do this season as a family in China. Our plan was to make the transition this past July. We didn't see the pandemic coming. The pandemic has put a halt on those plans. We don't know for how long. We're hoping that possibly next fall we'll get the green light to go. I'll work as an English teacher. Julie wants to really dive headlong into even more language study. So that's the plan. In the meantime, anytime we can interact with a Chinese international student, or take our kids to the Asian grocery in Cleveland, or read books or watch movies that are set in China or made in China, we try to do that to try to foster a love of the culture in them. One interesting thing is that our boys to this day do not prefer sweets, and in China, people just consume a whole lot more savory foods, and they really don't reach for the sweet foods like we do in the donuts, the candy bars. They have them, of course, but it's not quite the systemic thing that it is here in our culinary culture. And so to this day, they love rice, they love noodles, they love savory foods for breakfast. We often will just reheat, rice and leftover Chinese food from 2 days before, or ramen noodles. It's just funny to think that the building blocks of taste preferences are probably coded into one's mind and brain, during those first few years of life, and then linger throughout. So
That's so interesting you mentioned that, because there's a connector here with something that Barney helped us with at the church and your sons in terms of their taste preferences. We did a Japan Day in our Sunday school program like a year and a half ago or so. And we had two types of Kit Kats, just the typical US Kit Kat milk chocolate coating, and then a matcha Kit Kat that Barney helped me find that's from Japan. And your boys preferred the matcha tea Kit Kats to the regular ones. By far. Yeah. I had them laid on the table and they're like, are there any more of the green ones? We like this better. And it's just that taste preference, like you said, more of a savory. And that's so fascinating. Barney, I'm wondering if you have any connectors with what John shared, since you also are in a situation where you're teaching your children, in this case, English, while they're in a culture where they're immersed all the time in Japanese, because that's the language of the country where you're located. But do you hear any connectors with John and Julie's story? They're trying to keep going with Chinese, but their kids were surrounded by English speaking. You're trying to instill the English speaking while there's a lot of Japanese speaking. Can you relate to that, how that can be hard? Or I wonder if you have any connecting thoughts.
Yeah, I think that maybe I kind of keyed in on his mentioning how their love of their big sisters, and I think I could go in on all of these studies and whatnot, but yeah, it's the people that you play with, the people that you imagine with, that you create these stories with, basically while you're playing. That's the language that you really pick up on. And in my case, I'm just so thankful that I have the time to play a lot with my kids. And I talk with my coworkers and friends who also have, multicultural families. And but their schedule is much busier, and their children don't speak it as fluently or as many words of English as mine do. And I'm just so thankful for that, because going into this, I thought, oh boy, what chance do I have of one against, the extended family and later school, right? And thankfully, boy, there's just something where Yuma and now Silas, they, just creating these stories and these imagination and playtime with me, and they just pick up all these words. And then once they start to get that foundation, boy, like you say, they don't have any trouble picking up the rest of the words. And I'm just so thankful that Yuma he goes to a Japanese speaking kindergarten, but when he talks to me and he just switches to English right away, and sometimes he translates for me or for my wife and vice versa, even though we both understand the language. And yeah, it's just great. And I'm so appreciative of his kindergarten teacher who, when she's teaching, she occasionally watches his reaction. And if she notices that he's maybe looking a little confused, she's so clever. She asks him, what is this word in English? And then she knows if he can tell her what it means in English, then he understands. And I thought, wow, that's so neat, because he can also kind of show his classmates like his home, a little bit of his home culture too. And I think one other connection I wanted to mention is my cousin. She and her husband, they had one child naturally, and they also adopted a little girl from China. And I'm curious if you have a story similar to theirs. They talk about when they went to Walmart and they bought her a toy. She grew up in an orphanage, for maybe also until 3 or 4. And when she realized that this toy was for her, she said, I'm going to mispronounce it, but she said, Wadu, 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 it's mine, it's mine,
Mm.
it's mine, it's mine. She was so thrilled to have this, and just, boy, I'm sure that it made such an imprint on her heart with her new family and this new surrounding that she was trying to adjust to. And did you have any kind of like these small, I'm sure you have many of these small stories, maybe you could relate one or two?
Yeah. Our boys were in a foster family. They were in an orphanage for a while, and then they were in a foster family for a while, like a significant amount of time before we adopted them, which I think gave them more of a typical family experience. Well, obviously that goes without saying. From what we can tell, it was a very loving, nurturing environment in the foster family. We got to meet the foster mother, and she said goodbye to them like the day after we had met them. So that's very emotional for all of us and for her. And so I think in that respect, as we gave them some things that became their own, they were already sort of used to that. It wasn't such a shock like I would imagine it would be for a child who was completely immersed in the orphanage setting to not really necessarily have anything that was their own, that wasn't communally owned or whatever, communally shared. But one thing we quickly learned, because they're twins, this was when we went to Guangzhou, which is the city that the embassy that does the official adoption approval on the US side of things. We had an evening off or something, and one of them needed like a item of clothing. I can't remember what it was, maybe a jacket or something, because it was winter, and even though Guangzhou's in the south, I don't remember the item of clothing. But anyway, we went out to get like this one item of clothing that just one of our boys needed, and the other one quickly reacted like they knew that this was for, like, I think maybe we were buying it for Isaac, and Jonathan was like, hey now, like, where's mine? And really, like, we used to tell people that the only reason our boys fought with each other for the first year that we had them was over wanting the same toy. If we only had one of something, they would fight over it. We really didn't see like other kinds of conflict or fighting. Now we have like they've grown up a lot, and we've seen the whole gamut of interpersonal fighting and stuff, but and disagreements over things. But yeah, for the first year, it was pretty much their fights were limited to both reaching for the same toy, and there was only one to go around, and it meant that one person got it and the other guy didn't. So yeah.
John, I wanted to ask, in terms of having gone through this journey of adopting Jonathan and Isaac, and having gone through years too of learning about their home and wanting to give them opportunities to go deeper with that knowledge too, have you sensed it's shaped you, changed you, like in terms of your faith or how you view the world? Like, I could sense your own journey in terms of not doing countdowns anymore, being an opening up, maybe being, like you said, letting your hair down, kind of learning to let go or adopt a posture of more surrender. I don't know if that's a good word when you're in an environment that is new or different. I don't know if that is part of the journey. I'm just curious what types of, if there's something that jumps out to you as, oh, this, maybe I identify this helped me grow in this area, or makes me see things differently in this area or that area. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, the adoption process is such an act of faith. And, we went through these classes where they're preparing adoptive parents for the worst case scenarios. And I just remember thinking like, wow, I have to like really just be open to whatever and whoever God brings us. We don't know the trauma they've been through. We don't know what day-to-day life, how our lives will change when we have them, but we have to commit ahead of time to staying the course. And we know we have a good support system through our families, both Julie's family, my family, they were wholeheartedly supportive of us. And then our church family, just unbelievably supportive from the very beginning and every step of the way since. Our boys have a disability called arthrogryposis, and we're, we had a surgery last summer. We're looking at a surgery again this fall. And, our church has just always extended prayer and moral support and meals and gifts and stuff, just anything they can do to help us through these surgeries and medical things. And we're just so grateful for that. But I think the adoption was a good exercise in sort of like just sort of surrendering and saying, I don't know if this is going to be the hardest thing I've ever done, but I know that God is going to help us through, and our wonderful support system that we have that we're so thankful for will help us. We're not going to be left floundering. And I feel like in terms of our boys' psycho-emotional state, we've had a pretty easy time. They're resilient little guys. They've always had each other. We haven't really seen like the adoption angst, which is so common, or like the behavioral things and heavy emotional things that a lot of adoptive families have to deal with. That still could come as they continue to grow and ask more questions and, come to terms with the fact that their legs aren't like everybody else's, and there's some limitations there. But the hardest part is definitely has been and will continue to be the physical piece. So it is just, we have to just kind of hold our plans loosely. One silver lining of this delay, not getting to go to China like we hoped, is that we are looking at another surgery. There was an aspect of their surgery last summer that didn't work quite right. And so we're taking steps now to figure out what the cause of that was and how to remedy it so that they can be in a better place with their walking. And so, I think a lot of the events and unknowns leading up to that got us into a place where we can, despite the disappointment of not getting to go according to our timeline, we can like say, okay, Lord, we trust that you are in control. And if you want us to go to Asia, we'll get there someday. But right now, thank goodness we love where we're planted. And thank goodness we have the supports and the doctors that we do to help us along the way. Yeah. I keep telling people I've never been in a more, one moment at a time, sort of mindful, go with the flow state of mind than I am right now. Like, yeah, which is really a good thing.
Wow.
Since we're in our holding pattern and we don't know what the future holds. So
that's really powerful. Thanks for sharing that. And I know we're getting to the point where we typically will wind things down and close. But before we do, I just want to ask Barney, was there anything else that you wanted to ask John at this point? Or do you feel like he was able to speak to the questions that you had?
Yeah, for sure. It was just so wonderful for this brief time to finally have the chance to really get to know you better and talk a bit, and what a great story that you've been able to share with us, and kind of really speaking to how really Jesus is our shepherd, and knowing where we need to get that next bite of grass, taking us where we want to go. And just an amazing testament to see that, as usually happens, we have ideas that go one way and God says, well, how about this even better idea? and how things work out. And it's just so great to see that in your story today. And just really, I'm blessed to be able to be a part of this today. Thank you.
Well,
Yes.
thanks for inviting me on. It's an honor.
Yeah. Oh, it's our pleasure, John. It's our pleasure. Thank you. And I agree with Barney 100%. I feel inspired to hear how you're approaching this time of waiting with, as you said, like a focus of one day at a time, like staying present and staying grounded, because it most certainly would be hard and disorienting when the pandemic hit and it shuffled all these plans. And but your heart and your love for your kids comes through. Your faith, just trusting in God through this, comes through as you share, and it's inspiring. So I want to thank you for sharing that with us and for being so open to share your story. And it's really inspiring. I'm watching the boys grow and be fed and flourish in your home as a member of your broader community has been a real joy. So it's just great to see them continue to grow and thrive, and your whole family too as well. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank all of our listeners and those who may be watching the video version of our podcast as well. Thanks for taking time to be here for this conversation. And as always, we like to say this is a coming together of friends and sharing our experiences, and it's a real blessing just to be a part of this conversation. So we thank you, and until next time.